I have told this to almost no one, and the ones I told did not believe me, and I have stopped minding. A thing can be true and still sound like the sort of story an old woman makes up to feel she mattered. I am old now. I did not used to be. When it happened, I was 41 and my back already hurt in the cold, and my hands were the hands of someone who had worked with them since she was a girl, scarred across the knuckles, 2 fingernails that never grew back right. I tell you that so you understand what kind of person I was. I was not chosen for being clever. I was not chosen for blood or rank or any bright thing. I was the one who kept the lamps. The world was called Solen, though that was our name for it, stamped on a survey chart by someone who never went down to the surface. The Orelin had called it something we never learned to say. It was a dead world, and it had been dead a long time. The way a hearth is dead in a house no one has lived in for years, not violently, not in fire, just cooled, just left. There was no sun worth the name. There was a pale star far off that gave the sky the color of skimmed milk. And through that thin light, the whole planet lay gray and patient under a dust that never quite settled and never quite blew away. We came for the vault. Every expedition that ever went to Solen came for the vault, because the vault was the only thing on that whole gray ball worth the fuel to reach it. Buried under a ridge of slate, a hall so large that the first survey took it for a natural cavern, the long vault ran back into the rock farther than our lamps could throw. And at the far end of it, where the floor sloped down and the ceiling rose into dark, stood the thing the Orelin had left behind. We called it the Vigil. I do not know what they called it. I have thought since that perhaps it did not have a name at all, the way you do not name your own heart. It was tall as a watchtower and round as a well, a column of dark metal and darker stone, banded with rings of some material that drank the light instead of giving it back. Up its sides ran channels, fine as the veins in a leaf, and you could see they had been made to carry something bright, because the stone around them was scorched faintly gold, the way a lamp chimney goes gold from years of flame. At its crown sat a great cradle of curved arms, like cupped hands, and in those hands sat nothing. A hollow. A place where a light should be, and was not. The whole thing had the look of a lantern the size of a cathedral, and the lantern had gone out. It had been out for an age. The surveyors argued about how long, the way clever men argue, with charts and counts and long words, and the lowest number anyone said aloud was 10,000 years, and the highest I will not repeat because it made my head ache to think of it. What they agreed on was this. The vigil had been dark since before there were men to wonder at it, and in all the time men had wondered at it, it had refused them. That was the word the surveyors used. Refused. They did not like the word, being clever men, but they could find no better one. 3 expeditions before ours had come to wake the vigil, and each had failed, and each had failed worse than the last. The first had tried force, and the force had done nothing, not a scorch, not a crack, the dark metal taking their cutting fire the way a pond takes a thrown stone, swallowing it without a ripple. The second had tried keys, every code their machines could shape, every frequency, every pattern the Orelin had left scratched on the walls of the lesser chambers, and the vigil had taken all of it in silence, the way a deaf man takes a shout. The third had tried patience. They sat with it. They mapped it. They built towers of instruments around its base and read it for a year, and learned a great deal about what it was made of and nothing at all about how to make it speak. They went home with full charts and empty hands, and one of them wrote in his report a line I came to know well, because Dr. Voss read it to us our first night down, that the vigil was not locked but waiting, and that the difference between a locked door and a waiting one is that you cannot pick a waiting door. It opens when the one it waits for comes, and not before, and for no other. I thought that was the loneliest thing I had ever heard, and I was right, though not in the way I meant it then. We were the 4th expedition. Tindamere Reclamation, out of the old yards, a company that had learned the cheaper trade of going where richer companies had given up and selling what scraps remained. We were not the best funded expedition that ever went to Solen. We were the most stubborn, which is a different thing, and a thing I have come to respect more than money. Our surveyors were good and old and had been let go from better firms for being too honest. Our pilots flew patched ships. And our crew, the ones who did the carrying and the digging and the mending, were people like me, who had run out of better places to be. I want to be plain about my work because the work is the whole of the story, though I did not know it then. I was a tender. That is not a grand word, and it was not a grand job. On a long dig under stone with no sun, a camp lives by its lamps. We strung them down the length of the vault on cables and stands, hundreds of them, and they were old lamps, the kind that ran hot and ran dirty and failed often, and someone had to walk the line and keep them lit. That was me. Twice a shift I walked the whole length of the long vault, from the camp at the mouth down to the dark slope where the vigil stood, and I trimmed what needed trimming and cleaned what needed cleaning and relit what had gone out, and I carried in my satchel the small things a lamp needs, the wicks and the oil and the fine wire and the little striker I had carried since I was a girl, worn smooth from my thumb. It was not skilled work. The surveyors would have told you, and they would have been wrong, but it was the kind of wrongness clever men carry comfortably. There is a skill to keeping a flame alive in a cold place. There is a knowing in the fingers that you cannot put in a chart. A lamp that is guttering does not want oil. It wants the wick trimmed and the air let in. A lamp that smokes does not want trimming. It wants to be left to settle. A flame that has just been struck is a fragile thing and will die if you breathe on it wrong and live forever if you cup it right. I had cupped a great many flames in my life. I did not think of it as anything. It was only what my hands did. And I will tell you the thing about myself that matters most, the thing I would not have told a surveyor because he would have written it down and got it wrong. I could not stand to let a lamp go out. Not would not, could not. It was not a virtue. It was closer to a fault. If I passed a lamp going down toward the last guttering blue, and I was bound somewhere else with both arms full, I would set down what I carried and I would tend it every time, and I would be late wherever I was going. And I had been late my whole life for exactly this reason and had stopped apologizing for it before I was 30. A dying flame pulled at me the way a crying child pulls at a mother in a crowd, before thought, before choice. I do not know where it came from. My mother was the same. Her mother, she said, was the same. I had thought it a small family failing, the way some families cannot leave a tap dripping or a door ajar. I did not know it was the oldest thing in me. I did not know it was the thing the Orelin had crossed a galaxy to find. We had been down in the vault 11 weeks when it happened, and in those 11 weeks the surveyors had failed the way the 3 expeditions before us had failed, only faster, because we had less money and less time, and Dr. Voss was an honest man who could see the end of both. He was the head of our survey, Voss, a tall, stooped old man with a white beard gone yellow at the lip from the pipe. He was not allowed to smoke under stone and smoked anyway. He had given his life to the Orelin. He spoke their few words that anyone could speak. He had read every report from every expedition, and he carried the 3rd expedition's line about the waiting door folded in his breast pocket like a charm, and I think by the 11th week he had come to believe it was a curse. He tried everything they had tried, because that is what an honest man does even when he knows it has failed before he checks, in case the failure was theirs and not the thing's. He ran the keys. He ran the patterns from the walls. He stood at the vigil's base in the cold with his instruments and his young assistants, and he read it and read it, and the vigil stood there in the dark with its empty cupped hands and gave him nothing. I would pass them on my lamp rounds. The surveyors clustered at the foot of the great dark column, their voices low and tired, their machines whining, and I would tend the lamps near them so they could see to work. And Voss would nod at me sometimes, kindly, the way a tired man nods at the one who keeps the room warm, and never once did he imagine, and never once did I, that the thing he wanted was standing closer to him than his own assistants. It was carrying his lamps. The night it happened was not a special night. I want that understood. There was no sign. The clever men have asked me since, the ones who came after, whether there was a sign, a change in the readings, a tremor, anything, and I tell them no, and I can see they do not like it because a thing as large as what happened ought to announce itself, and it did not. It was a night like the others, cold, the pale star low. The camp half asleep at the mouth of the vault, and the long line of lamps burning down into the dark, and me walking the line with my satchel late, because I am always late. I came down toward the slope where the vigil stood, and the surveyors had gone up for the night, all but 2 of the young ones left to watch the instruments, and they were tired and not watching much. And on the last stand before the slope, the lamp was dying. It was an old lamp, that one, the oldest on the line, and it had failed more than any other, and I knew it the way you know a sickly animal in a herd. It was going down toward the last blue, the wick fouled, the air starved, the little flame hunched and shivering at the bottom of the glass like something cold. And I did what I have always done, what I could no more not do than I could stop my own heart. I set down my satchel, I knelt by the lamp, and I went about saving it. I trimmed the wick, I cleared the air slots with the fine wire, I cupped my hand around the glass to break the cold draft coming up the slope, and I leaned close and breath slow, and even on the dying coal of it, the long patient breath that does not blow a flame out but feeds it, and I spoke to it the way I always did, low, the foolish soft nonsense you say to a thing you are coaxing back from the edge. There now. Come on then, come back. And the flame heard me, the way they always do, and it caught, and it stood up off the wick clean and gold and steady, and the cold blue went out of it and it burned. It was the smallest thing I had done all day. I had done it 1,000 times. I have done it 1,000 times since. It took perhaps the length of a slow breath, that whole small rescue, kneeling on cold stone in the dark at the foot of a dead god, coaxing a guttering work lamp back to life because I could not stand to let it die. And the vigil opened its eyes. No, I will not say it that way, though that is how the clever men have written it since, because it is not true and the truth is stranger. It had no eyes. It did not look at me. What happened was quieter than looking and 1,000 times worse. The veins came alight. All up the great dark column, every fine channel I had taken for scorch and shadow, every leaf vein in that mountain of metal, filled at once with a slow climbing gold, not a flash, not a kindling, but a flow, as if my little lamp had touched off something that had been lying ready in the dark for 10,000 years, waiting only for a flame and a hand and a breath cupped right. The gold ran up the channels the way warmth runs up a chilled body, from the base where I knelt all the way to the cupped hands at the crown, and the cradle that had held nothing for an age filled with a light I cannot describe to you, because I have never seen its like before or since, a light that did not glare and did not flicker, that simply was, the way a star is, steady and enormous and old. The long vault, that had never in all its years been lit by anything but our poor failing lamps, stood suddenly full of a light like a held breath, and I saw the whole of it for the first time, the carved walls running back farther than I had ever known, the high ceiling I had never seen, the dust hanging gold in the air, and the 2 young surveyors frozen at their instruments with their faces turned up and their mouths open, and a look on them I have only ever seen on the faces of people in churches. The look of those who came to study a thing and found themselves in the presence of it instead. I did not move. I was still kneeling. My hand was still cupped around the small lamp still burning its small steady gold, and above it the mountain burned its enormous one, and I understood with a slow cold certainty that whatever had happened, I had done it, and I did not know how, and I was afraid. And then the vigil spoke. I have been asked many times what its voice was like, and I have never found the words, because it did not speak the way a man speaks, with breath and a mouth, and it did not speak the way our machines speak, flat and built. It spoke the way thunder speaks, if thunder meant something. A sound you felt in the floor and the bones of your chest before you heard it in your ears, and under that great low sound there was, somehow, language, words I should not have understood and understood anyway, the way you understand a thing in a dream. Voss told me afterward, when his hands had stopped shaking enough to hold his pipe, that it had spoken in the old Orellan tongue, the high form, the form he had spent 40 years and never heard spoken aloud, and that he had wept to hear it, an old man weeping at the foot of a light. But I did not hear Orellan. I will swear to that until I die. I heard my own tongue. I heard plain words in the plain voice of something vast and patient and unspeakably tired, and the words it said were these: "The lamplight has returned." I knelt there. I did not understand. I thought it meant someone else. I looked around the lit vault for the one it meant, the way you look around a room when a name is called and you are sure it is not yours, and there was no one there but two frightened boys and an old woman on her knees with oil on her hands. And the great light in the cupped hands seemed to gather, and the voice came again, lower, and I understood that it was speaking to me, that it had been speaking to me the whole time, that there had never been anyone else in all that great dark hall it could have meant. "You came," it said. "We kept the watch, we kept faith, you came back to light it." I want to tell you that I rose and spoke and was equal to the moment. I did not. I knelt on the cold stone with my heart going like a hammer, and I said the only thing in me, which was the truth, and the truth was small and foolish and exactly right, though I did not know it. I said I only fixed the lamp. My voice cracked saying it. It was going out. I couldn't let it go out. And the vigil, I swear this is true, the vigil made a sound that I have come to believe was the closest a thing like that can come to weeping, or to laughing, the two being nearer each other than the young think. A long, low, broken sound, like a held breath finally let go after an age of holding. "Yes," it said, "that is the whole of it, that is all it has ever been, you could not let it go out." And then it told me, in the long, slow, patient way of something with all the time there is and almost none of it left, what I was, and what they had been, and why a galaxy of dead machinery had been waiting 10,000 years for an old woman with oil on her hands to come down a dark hall and refuse to let a lamp die. And I will tell it to you the way it told it to me, as near as I can, though I was no scholar and the parts I did not understand I have had to learn since from Voss, who spent the rest of his life on it and died happy, which is more than most scholars get. The Orelin were old when our son was young. They were not warlike. The clever men who came after wanted them to have been warlike, because a thing that vast and that dead ought to have died in some great war, but they did not. They were keepers. That was the heart of them, the thing they were for. They went out among the stars and they found worlds going dark, not in fire, not in war, just cooling, just dimming, the long, slow death of worlds that lose their warmth, and the Orelin built lights, vigils. Great patient engines that would hold a failing world's warmth, keep its hearth alive, give the slow dying time. They strung them across the dark the way I strung lamps down the vault, hundreds of them on 100 dying worlds, and they tended them, and the worlds lived that would have died. And for a long age the Orelin walked the long line of the stars and kept the flames alight. But the Orelin died the way keepers die last after everything they kept. I do not know how. The vigil did not say, or said it in a way I could not bear to hold. They knew they were dying, and they did the thing keepers do when they know the night is coming and they will not see the morning. They did not try to save themselves. They built one last thing, and it was not a weapon, and it was not a vault of their treasures, and it was not a monument to make the stars remember them. It was a question. They built the vigils to go dark when the keepers died. All of them, across all those worlds, banked low and waiting, holding the last of their warmth in reserve. And they built into every one of them a single lock, and the lock was not a key or a code or a word. The lock was a quality. They had learned in their long age of keeping that the keeping could not be taught and could not be commanded and could not be bought, that it lived in a thing some creatures had and most did not, the thing that makes a hand reach for a dying flame before the mind has decided anything at all. They did not know if any other creatures in all the dark had it. They had hoped. And so they set the vigils to wait, banked and silent, for the day a stranger would come down a dark hall and find a small light dying, and asked by no one, paid by no one, knowing nothing of what it meant, kneel down and refuse to let it go out. That was the lock. That was the only key that would ever turn it, not the cleverest hand in the galaxy, not the strongest, the one who could not let a lamp go out. They had waited 10,000 years. The vigil told me, and this is the part I cannot say without my voice going, that I was not the first to come down that hall. Thousands had come. The 3 expeditions, and others before them lost to the records, and the Orelans' own scattered kin in the long ago, and creatures I have no names for. They had come with their keys and their fire and their patience and their charts, the cleverest and strongest the dark could send, and the vigil had taken all of it in silence, because none of them, not one in 10,000 years, had been the thing it waited for. They came to take. They came to study. They came to wake it. Not one of them in all that time had simply knelt and tended the light because they could not stand to see it die. Until me. Until an old tender on a poor expedition, walking her line, late as always, who saw a sickly lamp going down toward the last blue, and did the only thing she had ever known how to do. You did not come to wake me, the vigil said, and there was wonder in it, real wonder in a thing 10,000 years old. You did not know I was here to wake. You walked past me 100 times to tend lamps not worth tending, and tonight you knelt for the least of them, the one most fouled, the one any reasoning creature would have let die and replaced. You knelt for the one that needed you most. Lamprite. That is the whole of the test. That is the whole of what we are. You are the first to pass it in 10,000 years, and you passed it without knowing there was a test, which is the only way it can be passed. I knelt there and I wept, an old woman on cold stone. And I did not fully understand, and I understand more now, and I weep still when I tell it. Because do you see what they had done, the Orelan, those old keepers dying in the dark? They had not asked the galaxy to be clever. The galaxy was full of clever. They had not asked it to be strong. The dark is full of strong, and the strong had come, and the strong had failed. They had asked the galaxy one question, and one only, the question keepers ask. Is there anyone out there who cannot let a light go out? And they had set their lights to wait, banked and patient across 100 worlds, until the answer came. And the answer, when it came at last, after 10,000 years of silence, was a human woman with scarred knuckles and a worn striker, late for somewhere, kneeling in the cold for the least lamp on the line. The answer was us. That is the part the clever men never write right when they write it at all. They write that the human activated the vigil as if I had found a switch. They write that I unlocked it, as if there were a code in me I did not know I carried, some secret blood, some lost inheritance of the Orelan running in my veins. It is none of that, and it is so much better than that, and they cannot bear how simple it is, so they dress it up. There was nothing special in my blood. There was nothing special in me at all, nothing the surveyors could measure, and they tried after. They measured me for a year and found a tired old woman. The thing in me was not rare because it was grand. It was rare because it was small, and the galaxy does not prize small things, and so almost nothing in all the dark had bothered to keep it. But we kept it. Humanity, some of us. The mothers who cannot leave the crying child, the menders who cannot leave the dripping tap, the tenders who cannot let a lamp go out. We had carried it down the whole long line of our generations without ever knowing it was anything, the way I carried it from my mother and she from hers, a small, soft, useless instinct, a thing that made us late. We thought it our failing. It was the oldest virtue in the universe, and we were the ones who still had it, and we did not even know we were carrying it, which the vigil told me is the only way it survives. The moment you keep a flame to be praised for keeping it, you have already let it go out. The light in the cupped hands held steady over me, gold and enormous and old, and I understood that it was not only this one. The vigil told me there were others. 100 dying worlds across the dark, 100 banked and waiting vigils, 100 dark halls with a single failing light, each one waiting still for the one who could not let it die. This one had woken because I had come. The others slept on. And the vigil asked me. It did not command, it asked, the way one keeper asks another, whether there were more of us, whether the small soft instinct it had found in one tired human ran in others, whether humanity, if it knew now what it carried, would do what the Orelan had done, and go out along the long line of the stars and find the dying lights and kneel and tend them and keep the dark from closing. I am an old woman, and I was never clever, and I could not answer for all of us kneeling there, but I knew us. I had carried our lamps 11 weeks down a dark hall, and I had seen the worst of us and the best, and I thought of my mother and her mother, and the long line of the late and the soft-handed who could not walk past a dying thing, and I thought, yes, if we knew. If anyone told us there were lights going out in the dark and no one left to tend them, there would be no holding us back. It is the one thing we have never been able to help. So I told the vigil yes. I said, we will come. And I meant it, and we did, though that is a longer story than this one, and I was too old to see much of it. They came down to find me at the foot of the light, Voss and the others, drawn by the gold pouring up the long vault, and they found an old woman kneeling and weeping in the presence of a thing they had failed for years to wake. And Voss knelt beside me, an honest old man with tears in his yellow beard, and he did not ask me how I had done it, because I think he already half knew, having read the third expedition's line so many times. He only put his hand on my shoulder, and we knelt there together in the light, the keeper of the Orleans' last question, and the man who had given his life to hearing it answered. And above us, the vigil burned the warmth back into a world that had been cooling for an age. And through the breached ceiling of the vault, for the first time in 10,000 years, the dead gray world of Solène felt heat from below and stirred. I lived a long time after. I am living still, telling you this. They wanted to make me into something after the companies and the scholars, and I would not let them, because I knew it would have spoiled the very thing they wanted, and I think Voss knew it too and shielded me from the worst of it until he died. I went back to tending lamps. I tend them still. My hands are too old for much else, and they were never good for much else, and I have made my peace with that, more than peace, because I know now what these hands are for, and it is the oldest and best work there is, though it has no name grander than tender, and it makes you late. People ask me, the few I tell, whether I was not frightened, kneeling at the foot of a waking God, and I tell them yes, I was frightened for the length of a breath, and then I was not, and I have never been able to make them understand why, so I will try once more here with you, because I am old and this is the truest thing I know. I was not frightened in the end because it had not come to take anything from me or to test whether I was worthy in the way the clever fear they are not worthy. It had only been waiting, 10,000 years in the dark alone, for someone to come who would do the small kind thing it was built to recognize. It was not a god. It was a lonely keeper who had outlived everything it kept, holding the last of its warmth in reserve, waiting through an age of silence for one creature in all the dark to kneel in the cold and refuse to let a light go out. It had been so long alone, and I had come. And I had only fixed the lamp, because I could not stand to let it go out, and that had been enough, that had been everything. That small, soft, useless thing my mother gave me had been the one answer the whole dark galaxy had failed for 10,000 years to give. I think of it, the long line of us. I think of the dark and the dying lights strung across it and the 100 halls still waiting and the small soft instinct we carry without knowing, the thing that makes us late. And I think, let us never learn to walk past a dying flame. Let us stay the kind of creature that kneels. It is the oldest thing in us, and it is the best. And it is the only thing the keepers of the dark ever asked us to be. We do not have to be clever. We do not have to be strong. We only have to be the ones who cannot let the light go out. I have lit a great many lamps in my life. I will light a great many more before I am done. And when my hands at last go too old even for that, I will give the striker to someone younger, the way my mother gave it to me, and I will not tell them what it is, because they would only ruin it by trying to be worthy of it. I will only tell them what my mother told me, which is the whole of it, which is the only key that ever turned the oldest lock in all the dark. Don't let it go out. Whatever else you do, don't ever let it go out.